Mike Bergin, thank you for joining me today.
It's always a pleasure to speak with you, Mike.
I am particularly excited to talk to you today because I get to talk to you about some questions I've had for quite a while about your background. And I also want to talk about the role Mathchops is playing for you in your practice, because it's a bit different than the role it plays for other tutors. So I think people will be interested. But let's start with your background. So to say you have a deep background in test prep is a huge understatement. President of the National Test Prep Association, co-founder of the Test Prep Tribe with Amy Seeley and Facebook. You also are the founder of Chariot Learning.
True.
And you were at Kaplan and Huntington. Have I missed anything? Did you work anywhere before Kaplan?
No,
Okay.
I was supposed to work somewhere before I started Kaplan, as you know, in education. I had plenty of jobs before that.
Sure.
Including drug counselor for the New York City Board of Education. But yeah. I was living in California, and a friend invited me to start with Kaplan in Boston. And I thought, well, I was tired of California, and I didn't really imagine that Kaplan was a national company. I could work for them anywhere. So I drove across the country, and I started as a teacher for Kaplan, and I was teaching GRE and GMAT and PSAT and SAT all over New England. And then I moved back to my native Bronx and started working out of the White Plains Center. I think you know the geography quite well. And I, started as a teacher there, but then I was invited to become a center manager. And eventually I became the director for a bunch of counties, for Bronx and Westchester, Rockland, Putnam, Dutchess, Orange, like we had a big territory, and that meant managing all of the business, all of the classes, all of the different tests that we supported, managing the White Plains Center, lots of teacher hiring and training, lots of parent calls.
Always.
It was a pretty busy job. And so then I guess at the time, I was not shy about my frustrations with the way Kaplan operated certain aspects of their program, especially the SAT, ACT. That was the SAT. I'm not even going to say ACT. That wasn't a consideration. The SAT, and this was mid-90s leading up to 2000.
Yeah.
SAT was our focus. And at the time, we had Kaplan's biggest SAT book of business by center.
Yeah.
And Huntington Learning Center was in the process. They wanted to revamp their test prep program to better align with their K through 12 programs and make it a bigger part of their revenue stream. So they recruited me to be part of the exam prep department. And eventually I was the director of the exam prep department. And then eventually I just was the exam prep department. And I created all of Huntington Learning Centers from 2000 to 2008, all of the SAT, ACT, IC, SSAT programs. I wrote at the time all the grants that got us into states for the No Child Left Behind funding. Was quite a time.
Interesting. Yeah. And that interest in developing curriculum and materials for students and tutors has persisted, right? Because I mean, with your own company, those are all your materials.
Well, very much so. I'm glad that you asked, because when I decided to create Chariot Learning, and this was at the end of 2008, beginning of 2009, I recognized that I had grown frustrated with the complications and the downside of retail prep. You're basically, if you were signing up to get preparation from a big box company or just any kind of retail name, you would have a chance of getting a great tutor. It's no guarantee that you wouldn't get a great tutor, but that would have nothing to do with the company itself. Right. The great tutor would be great because somebody who was an innately excellent educator heard the call, put themselves in the seat. I worked for Kaplan and I thought I was a great teacher. I don't think Kaplan made me a great teacher. Right. A lot of these companies, and so their curriculum at a big organization like that, where they've scaled well beyond the point where the person in charge of the company is directly training and managing teachers, is to supplement what a teacher should do, so that if you don't get a great teacher, well, it's in the curriculum.
Right.
But I wanted to create a different shot with Chariot Learning. I was like, a great teacher makes great things happen. If you want the best score increases the fastest in ways that will bring enduring value for the rest of your life, you want a highly experienced and effective educator. And a highly experienced and effective educator wants a curriculum that's going to support that. Right. So I wrote the program to support great tutors, and I was glad that I had that experience, but I had to create an entirely new program than what I had created for Huntington, which ultimately wasn't really the expression of my philosophy on instruction. The Chariot Learning curriculum is, and I mean, it was over-engineered for our purpose. I started it and it was just me for a year, and then eventually I started bringing teachers on. But after, a decade of that, this is back in 2009, I started, it's like, really, this is a great world-class curriculum. I know what the other companies do, and I know what we do. So now a lot of educators in other states license our curriculum through the TestBright label. Yeah.
And you also have a self-paced course, I think, too, right?
Called Test Flip. And that's, again, it's just a way to say that if you know how to teach and you have a great program, it behooves you to try to serve as many students in as many ways as possible in the way that's best for them. I don't think that a self-paced program is the best way to prepare for the SAT or ACT, but many families do. And if they do, I would rather, because look, we are in a golden age of self-paced programs and free programs, and Khan Academy is fantastic. But I would much rather a student who's trying to do it him or herself have access to actual test preparation strategies and insights. And that's part of what a good curriculum should provide. So the Test Flip program, you get the ability to take a bunch of classes that I teach personally for a fraction of what it costs to work with me personally.
Right. And maybe, that's not the sole thing they're using. Maybe you direct them to that one particular week because they miss a class or they
right. And I don't need to tell you how valuable a supplemental resource can be to your primary educational program, right? It's like Test Flip, like Mathchops, doesn't have to do everything.
Right.
It just has to do the thing that the tutor or company running a program needs done with that resource.
Right. Exactly.
And great programs are looking for the best, most efficient, most effective resources possible to drive success.
Yep. So you've created all these resources. Where does Mathchops fit in all that? What's the role it plays with your own students?
So I differ from many of my colleagues. And one of the things that I love about the Test Prep Tribe and the National Test Prep Association is I get to speak with amazing educators from all over, not just the United States, but the world. And there are many ways to run a prep program. Lots of, maybe you do a diagnostic, maybe you don't, maybe you do a hybrid diagnostic, maybe you have students take, 2 full tests before you decide what they do. We all can differ. And one of the ways that I break from most of my colleagues is that I don't assign a lot of homework. And I can't, because my commitment to helping students get their best test scores as quickly and efficiently as possible, say in a tutoring setting, usually that means we get about 2 hours a week with a student. And the students that we work with tend to be really busy. They are, I'm not going to characterize all of them, but we certainly work with a lot of high achievers, which means they're juggling tremendous academic and extracurricular and social and work commitments at the same time that they're trying to get the test in. Some of the students might have a more open schedule, especially if we can plan effectively for our point of attack. But at the end of the day, I can't give them a lot of homework between sessions because A, they don't have the time, B, there's a good chance a chunk of them aren't going to do it. And I can't build a program that relies on everybody doing everything before every session, whether it's individual or group. And C, and I think this is really important, we always want to move forward. And if we're reviewing homework, then we're losing instructional time. If my tutoring is designed to be really efficient, where every 2-hour session we work with a student, they're going to move forward. They're learning a lot. We have a ton to cover. And our average student only does 14 hours of instruction. I can't spend 6 hours of that on reviewing homework. It's
Right.
different when we assign a full practice test, because you can't replace full practice tests.
No.
You simply can't. You're not preparing for a test if you're not taking practice tests. And that deserves its own review. But when it comes to, say, math, I can't assign a lot of math homework and then trust that the student will have derived value from it if I don't check it, unless there's a program out there that actually does that for me. And finally, there is. Mathchops does that. And so I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
We do not, at Chariot Learning, assign any other resource or outside work besides Mathchops. It's the only resource that we found that kind of fits our instructional philosophy.
That's awesome. Yeah, and it's so fun to talk to different tutors for me too, because they, for the same reasons you're saying, they run their business differently and they use Mathchops so differently.
Yes.
So it's great to hear that it is such a flexible tool that people can use it in their own way with their own students. One thing I wanted to talk to you about in particular was a student you had over the summer, because, well, I'll let you give the details, but she needed help with subject tutoring.
Absolutely. So it was very interesting because I had a parent who called us and said, my daughter, because of COVID, this is one of the very few parents that recognized that maybe the math that students learned during COVID did not adequately prepare them for the real world. And so she said, my daughter did fine. She took algebra. She just did geometry. She's going into Algebra 2 next year. And over the summer, we want to pre-prepare her, make sure her algebra skills are tight and get her ready for Algebra 2. And I was like, okay, maybe we can do that. And I spoke to my Algebra 2 tutor and he said, look, it's really hard to do without a textbook. And, you can go and find a resource, but at the end of the day, we didn't have a pre-Algebra 2 program in place just because we didn't have demand for it. And we didn't want to go to all the effort of sourcing a book and building something for just one student. And I also my Algebra 2 tutor was really busy with other tutoring and we just didn't have the resources. So I called the parent. I said, listen, we'd love to help you, but we can't. This is just not something we have time for. And she pushed back. She said, no, you're the one who's going to be able to help her. I know that you guys can. Just want you to be able to focus on, getting ready for it. You don't have to teach her all of Algebra 2, but I want to make sure that her skills are strong. And so I chewed on it for a while, and I will add at this point that I am not a math subject tutor. I don't do that. I prep students for the SAT and ACT. That's what I do. So that's my math. When people tell me what they're doing in Algebra 2, if it's not on the tests, I probably don't know it. I'm not in it for the love of math.
Sure.
But I thought about this, and then I called you. I said, I think that Mathchops would make a great review if we're really talking about making sure that her math skills are strong, and Mathchops runs the range from, basic arithmetic into Algebra 2. I bet we can cover what she needs to cover and make sure that her skills are tight. And maybe we can have her work in Mathchops, and I'd give her different goals, and I'd meet with her once a week just to make sure she was meeting them.
Yep.
And you said, that sounds great.
Yeah. I think I recommended, working on a similar routine, definitely within the SAT, because it's so closely aligned to that.
That's right.
And then, see if she can get up to a 640, and if she gets stuck, work on the category challenge badges. And there were certain ones that are a little bit more closely aligned with her school curriculum than others. Yeah,
exactly.
And how did she respond to it?
She loved the idea. So the parent was very grateful. She was like, thank you so much. I said, listen, we'll try this, and I'll do it myself because I'm really curious about this. See if it works, and we'll see how it goes. And this was an utterly delightful, mature, academically curious young woman, just going into 10th grade. So it's not, she loved the entire experience. We spent the whole summer. She would work in Mathchops. She would rise, she would plateau, we would adjust, and we would meet, and we would just go over questions. We weren't just going over Algebra 1 or Algebra 2 questions. We did the full range. I just said, you know what, we're going to prepare you for the SAT. And if you get to where we want you to be, not only are you going to be ready for Algebra 2 this year, but we have already done a big chunk of your math prep for the following year when you take the SAT. and she loved it. I mean, she would do hundreds of problems a week when, time permitted, and she loved to go over all of the questions. And I gotta say, by the end of the summer, I think she was at a 700 math. Like, she was on top of this. She had mastered the math that she needed for the test. I could have had her take the SAT at that point, but she was like, I'll wait until next year.
That is so great. And has she been doing okay in school this year, or have you heard?
The best news is no news.
Yeah.
I'm sure she's fine. And I'll hear from her, I'll hear from her and her mom towards the end of this academic year. But she, she had the platform for success in such a way that I am really confident that I could lead a cohort of students into a pre-Algebra 2 program just using Mathchops.
Yeah.
And it would be very effective because they would do the bulk of the work. Mathchops would do all the correction and the adaptation. And as an educator, I can go in and I can see what they get wrong. And when we talk about it, we can review the problems together and see how to get those questions right. It makes a huge difference. So it's a more active form of, for the most part, we just have our students that need to work in Mathchops. And I'll say that my own daughter, who is closing in on a great ACT score, is a Mathchops aficionado. But for this purpose, I think this is a different use case where a tutor can be more active in working with a student. But I love it. And I'm definitely going to create a summer program for this.
That's great. And you say more active, and I'm hoping that you were more active in the session, but really not all that active between sessions. I mean,
I was not active at all. No, that's Mathchops' job. My job is to come in at the point of instruction and review. And I know some people may be more actively monitoring their students' progress during the year, but my philosophy with Mathchops is I don't even give certain challenges. I sometimes just say, I just want you to do 200 or 300 or more, and I tell them they have to use a certain amount of time. I hate to see when a student's plowed through a bunch of problems, with an average of 7 seconds per problem. That doesn't do anybody anything. But that's helpful to be able to tell students, look, you're putting in the work, but you're not getting the results because you're not taking the time. Yep.
Well, Mike, this was super interesting. Thank you so much for taking the time today. Any final words for our viewers?
I mean, I could talk about Mathchops all day. It's unfortunately we don't have time, but as far as a resource to supplement school success and test success, Mathchops is one of a kind. It's really outstanding. And thank you, Mike, for your role in providing it.
My pleasure. Thanks again, Mike. I'll talk to you soon.
So long.